So, I just saw the ending to BoJack Horseman, and I had another video planned for today, but after seeing that ending, I need to talk about this show immediately. So, sorry if the video seems a bit rushed. BoJack Horseman has two endings, depending on your point of view. And before I get into them, I need to tell you spoilers. So, go watch it if you haven't already, because dear God, if that show is not something special. You still here? So the two endings, either we take what we saw and BoJack lived and went on with his life, or B, BoJack's dead. He died in the pool and everything else we see was all a dream. But before we get to these, just to refresh, I'm going to do a brief recap of the final 3 episodes, just so we're all on the same page. So the last we see of BoJack, he's drunk, sitting in his former home and watching the Blu-ray of Horsing Around. And we see his audition tape where Herb says, "Your life is about to start." Cut to BoJack, sitting alone, and on to the next episode. BoJack's having the dinner party dream, which was foreshadowed by Dr. Champ earlier in the season. He gets in there with Sarah Lynn, who's constantly aging in the episode, and eventually they all get down to dinner, when they talk about their best and worst moments while eating their last meals they had before they died. Note that BoJack is eating pills and drinking pool water. He's noticing the black tar of Hollywood leaking in, which we'll get to later. And then Secretariat / Butterscotch walks in and he gets his best and worst moment. BoJack then throws up the tar, and then we're off to the show, which BoJack notes he's never gotten to before. Everyone from his dream gets a final show. Noticeably, Sarah Lynn performs Gina's song from season 5 and then goes through the door into darkness. And BoJack starts to notice something's up. But before anything can happen, he's outside having a final chat with Secretariat / Butterscotch / his dad figure on the bridge. And then we get the revelation: BoJack's in the pool. BoJack is dying. And then a little later we get that poem. And holy shit, is that poem brilliant. It's from Secretariat's point of view, having jumped to kill himself, realizing his mistake and being unable to change it halfway down. And with that, it all keeps building. BoJack's soon alone and the tar is coming for him. He's sinking in it and he tries to escape it, realizing his mistake, but it's too late. And the last thing he does to comfort himself is to call Diane as the tar takes him and we get the flatline. Next episode. BoJack's alive. He goes to prison and is released for a day. He's picked up by Mr. Peanut Butter and we get their old dynamic of one being excited and one being grouchy. We get our spontaneous Todd adventure. We get Princess Carolyn talking BoJack through something. And then we get Diane on the roof. By the way, I'd love to talk about all these character dynamics individually between BoJack and his friends, but time's short at the moment and I'm going to have to save it for another video. So then we're on the roof, and BoJack and Diane talk for a while. They look at the stars, Mr. Blue comes in, and then the credits roll. You get all that? Good. So we'll get on to the endings, and we'll go for the more depressing one first, because that's fun. BoJack's dead. And that's the end. And there's a lot of evidence to support this theory. Ever since the start of the show, we've seen the same few frames in the intro of BoJack drowning in the pool with Diane and Mr. Peanut Butter looking down on him. In an earlier season, we got BoJack's fantasy with Charlotte, where it ends with him walking off into the water. In another season, we heard Bojack say that it felt like him and his family were drowning together. And where do we see Bojack's family in the dream? Under the pool, drowning together. And the halfway down poem, Bojack halfway down in his own pool, dying in water like the poem's speaker and his father figure, Secretariat. And who played Secretariat? BoJack Horseman. All this idea of drowning brings up what Charlotte said about the Tar of Hollywood seasons ago. By the time you realise you're sinking, it's too late. And in BoJack's dream, the thing he's influenced by is tar. He's sinking and it's too late. If we're to believe his dream spans the 2 episodes instead of the 1 as we're led to believe, we can look into a few other things. The last meals everyone eats at the dinner table. Sarah Lynn has the fast food from the bender. Herb has his peanuts. Beatrice has hospital food. Cracker Jack has rations. Corduroy has his lemon. And BoJack has pills and pool water. His final meal, he didn't wake up. Episode 16 is still the dream before he dies. As Herb says,
BJ, there is no place. It's just your brain going through what it feels like it has to go through.
And it sums it all up perfectly. The whole last episode seems rushed and too perfectly tied up, like BoJack's mind is filling the gaps. Everyone gets a seemingly perfect ending and everything seems to come too easy. Even prison was simple for BoJack. He got to redo his teaching gig. Herb also says,
"Find your peace, big guy. Find it."
And it's exactly what BoJack's going through. Talking to who he feels like he needs to talk to before he goes. With each one cutting to black after. Why black? Because of the tar. BoJack gets one last grumpy talk with Peanut Butter, one last hurrah with Todd, one last pep talk with Princess Carolyn, and one last heartfelt one with Diane. Let's talk about those last 2. Notice how Princess Carolyn almost avoids the subject of BoJack's future and career. Like, she knows there isn't one coming, but she still tries to comfort him anyway. That's BoJack's brain doing what it needs to do and finding its peace. And then there's Diane, which is probably the most important relationship to come out of this entire show. On the bridge, before he goes, BoJack's last wish is to talk to Diane before he dies. And when he wakes up, he gets that wish and he gets to talk to Diane on the roof. And what happens after he talks to Diane? The show ends.
And above all else, the show has to keep going. There's always more show. And you can call horsing around dumb or bad or unrealistic, but there's nothing more realistic than that. You never get a happy ending, because there's always more show. I guess until there isn't.
The show ends because BoJack's brain did what it needed to do. It found its peace. It did what it wanted, to talk to Diane again. And then he died, alone in the pool. Diane says, "I'm glad I knew you," implying he's gone. BoJack looks up to heaven and the stars, while Diane's eyes remain grounded. BoJack had never gotten to seeing the end of the show before, and when he finally did, there was no show left. BoJack is dead. Or is he? The other ending is the one we saw play out. BoJack woke up, he went to prison, he went to the wedding, and everyone moved on with their lives, having grown. There's less arguments for this one, but they can be seen as stronger. The intro we've grown so accustomed to always ended on Bojack sunbathing on the pool's surface, not in it. In the end, Bojack always stayed above water, only barely though, like he barely survived another near-death experience. And the argument only gets stronger. At the end of episode 15, if you keep playing until the end, the heartbeat carries on. We hear it start the beat again. Bojack survived, and the flat line we hear at the start of episode 16 is just the flat line from when the horse died at the end of Horsing Around. It's not real. And then, if we look at episode 16 as if it was a dream, a few things wouldn't make sense. There couldn't be a time jump because that's not how dreams work. And Bojack didn't know about Todd's mom, Judah, or Diane being in Texas. So how would his dream know that? And we can also look at what Bojack dying means for the show from a writing perspective. While yes, it's a fitting and plausible end for Bojack, as depressing as that sounds, it doesn't work for two reasons. One, how it affects the other four leads, especially Diane. Diane, the woman who helped him get better, who finally got the happiness she deserves, finds out he dies because she wasn't there, and he's dead because she didn't pick up her phone fast enough. How fucking horrifying is that? How much of an unplausible fuck you to her character is that after endless development in the final season? It just doesn't work. And if Bojack does die, it undermines the entire meaning of the show. Instead of being a show about a broken man dealing with his flaws, it's a show about a broken man who eventually succumbed to his flaws. The last few conversations Bojack has inspires hope for better. Mr. Peanut Butter says he'll always be with him. Todd teaches him about turning himself around. Princess Carolyn is giving him hope for a future. And Diane is grateful to have known him, because Bojack said seasons ago,
That's my legacy. I have nothing to show for the life that I've lived, and I have nobody in my life who's better off for having known me.
That isn't true.
Isn't it, though?
When I was a kid, I used to watch you on TV.
And for one last laugh, we can look at the honeydew. A stupid gag that's been running forever. Bojack actually has some honeydew. And you know what? It wasn't that bad. Because he's truly changed, and for the better. So, there's two really strong arguments there. Almost Schrodinger's Bojack. Is he alive or is he dead? And I think it's obviously intentional. And I think the true ending to BoJack Horseman is that there are two endings. That in the end, it's about how you choose to perceive it, and it's like how we choose to deal with these things in our own life. One of the last things Herb says is,
Look, BJ, it's possible that someone is going to find you and save you, and it's also possible that someone won't. We don't get to know.
and he's right. We don't get to know. We can only assume and make our own headcanons. The ending of episode 14, Herb says on the Blu-ray,
Buckle up, buddy. Your life is about to start.
was that the beginning of his new life, or did that mean it was the end of his life? It's a Zoe and a Zelda. One is hopeless and one is hopeful. Either BoJack spent his last moments imagining his closest relations living happy lives, or it actually happened, and everyone was happy and everyone moved on. It's the picture that was hanging on BoJack's office all this time. One horse drowning in the pool, and one standing next to it. let's talk about those final lines. Bojack says,
Yeah, well, what are you gonna do? Life's a bitch and then you die, right?
which is episode 15. Bojack's life was a bitch and then he died. The bleak ending, but to some fitting. And then Diane says,
Sometimes life's a bitch and then you keep living.
Yeah.
which is episode 16. The happier ending some may prefer. They say you can't have your cake and eat it, but I think the writers of this show did something truly magnificent. They had the cake and they ate it. And to end, no matter what ending you pick, it was nice while it lasted.